Hey book lovers, Lori here. I'm back to do my part one of my February reading wrap up. February is always a weird month because it's so much shorter than, sorry, then it's so much shorter than the other months. And I did have a little bit of a weird reading month. I did read some really good books, but I also had some disappointing reads, and that you'll see in part two. But I just want to sort of go through everything that I read. I was also doing two reading challenges this month. I did the one from the TBR and Beyond reading group. I also did the Avengers reading challenge from Coffee Books and Bullet Journals. I didn't choose a board to focus on this month because I was reading a lot. I was supposed to read a lot of contemporaries this month. But I did actually wind up getting Thor. I captured Thor, and if you watch the reading challenge, you mean that Thor's on my team now, which um you get more things when you get more people. So I did wind up getting Thor. I hope by the end of this reading vlog, this reading month, I may have gained another Avenger. But yeah, I'm really excited about that. But I did have some fun reads, and I just want to kind of go through them. This is also the last month that I will be teaching from my house. I'm going back to work this week. So I'm excited for that. It just will definitely change my TBR for the month of March that I'm still planning, but we'll get there in a couple of videos. So the first book that I wound up finishing in the month of February was Kiss My Cupcake by Helena Hunting. I thought this book was so fun. It was exactly what I wanted. Basically follows these two characters, Blair and Ronan, and their bars are next door to each other, and it's definitely love to hate. It's really cute. I love books that have a baking or a job element to it, especially fun. And she has a cupcake bar with booze, and he has a bar that his grandfather owned that he kind of makes a little bit more, unique. He has axe throwing and stuff, and they definitely get off to being they don't really like each other, but it's a contemporary. I bet you could see where it goes. It was just fun. I really like this book. It just made me laugh. There was a lot of elements in this book was fun, and it just put a smile on my face. And I wound up giving this book 4 stars for review. I haven't heard the best things about her other books. I've heard some mixed things, but this one I really enjoyed, and I think the setting was the thing that definitely got me for this book. I did like the romance. I definitely like the setting. I like the side characters. I like that she was a Harry Potter fan, the character. So it was great. I wound up giving this one 4 stars for review. Normally in February, I read short, quick reads, and I think that's where I deviated a little bit and why I had some less thrilling reads in the second half of the month, because I burned myself out on reading 2 chunky books pretty much back to back. So last month, the book for their reading challenge, for the Avengers reading challenge, was Legendborn, and this is also an Owl Crate book. I also did have an ARC that the publisher sent me a couple of months ago, but I actually wound up really enjoying this book. I thought this was such a fun take on the Merlin myth, and especially how it was crafted. But basically, you follow this girl named Bree, and her best friend wind up going to UC Chapel Hill for a high school program, which doesn't actually exist, but in the book it does. And she winds up getting sucked into this magical world. I will say, I have read at this point, I've read every single Mortal Instrument book. So this book really screamed to me very, very Mortal Instrument-y and also Merlin-y. I really like those elements. I like the characters. I thought that was great. The one thing I still gave this book 4 stars. The one thing I struggled with a little bit in this book was I thought that it was very focused on that paranormal element, and she's at this prestigious school and XYZ, and you really don't hear about that at all. So I felt like it was a little bit of an unbalanced story in that way. But I did like it. I thought that the development of different magic systems sort of working together was really interesting. It sort of reminded me a little bit of Percy Jackson when they introduced the Roman mythology. I thought that it was an interesting way. It also really was a very, very hard read. It does deal a lot with grief, depression, stuff like that, but it also deals with the African American experience, and that was a little bit hard to read. I thought that this book was a very, very long book. I think this book was about close to 500 pages. And I thought the pacing in the middle was a little bit slow, and the pacing at the end was super fast. And I like it to be a little bit more of a pace story, because at the end I just was like, I just thought it was a little bit long for my liking, but overall I really liked it. I thought the ending was really unique. I'm definitely going to have to reread this book before book 2 comes out, but it was very interesting, and as a Merlin fan, I love the take on it, and I can't wait to see where book 2 goes for sure. The next book I read, I'm really excited for. I actually know this person. Is she's on a lot of podcasts that I listen to throughout the past couple of years. Her name is Karen Rott, and she wrote a series. It's called, well, I mean, she wrote a series. I actually only read book 1, but there's 2 books out. The third book's coming out, I think, in May, she said. And this is like a paranormal mystery series with ghosts. I adored this book. I devoured it in like 2 days. I thought it was so fun, so great. Here's a photo. I have said this before. I will pretty much read anything. Like I will pretty much read any book that I can get my hands on. This book does something that I haven't read before. It combined the cozy mystery genre with the paranormal genre and then just kind of expanded on it. But you basically follow this girl named Cassie, and she was basically hunted by a serial killer when she was younger. And that led her to almost dying. And when she came back from the death after being almost killed by the serial killer, she has the ability to see ghosts. And she works for a couple of years. She helped the police, and she's actually like a spin-off character from another series that Karen helped write, I think. So this is her own series. But this book follows her as she kind of gets invested into kind of solving another potential serial killer mystery, but it also then connects back to the murder that she was involved in, and then she's also struggling with her powers. I really love this book. I gave it 5 stars. I need to get my hands on book 2. I'm going to try to do that maybe in March, especially because I'm commuting. These books are a little bit shorter. That might actually happen. I still haven't planned my March TBR, but I really like this book. The one thing I sometimes struggle with a cozy mystery series is that the mysteries aren't that fleshed out and you can sort of predict what's happening. This book was sort of the opposite. I did not know what was happening, and I loved it. I've said this before. I love supernatural elements in my mysteries. It was great. It was so fun. I loved her writing style. I love the character. She also deals, like, there was a lot of PTSD, anxiety, and depression that was mentioned. And it was a really, really great fast paced read. Definitely perfect for Halloween. Like, I will definitely read them out, like, not in season, but we'll definitely hope that in the next 6 months we'll have another one to read during Halloween, because I really liked it. And the cliffhanger has me saying, what is going to happen next? I will say it's a slow. I will say it's not really romance heavy in this book. They do have a romance, but I'm saying it's probably going to develop as the books go on. But I really liked it, gave it 5 stars, and can't wait to read book 2. My nonfiction listen for the month was Lead from the Outside by Stacey Abrams. Here is a photo. If you don't know who Stacey Abrams is, or you're not from America, she is the woman that campaigned to be governor and lost her governor race 2 years ago, I think. And she also is one of the people that is was very heavily responsible for turning Georgia blue in the 2020 election. And she sort of wrote a couple of books. She's also like a fiction writer, and I actually have those on my TBR as well. But this is like sort of like a guidepost book, I would say, like to kind of like give you advice about finding your way in the world, but also really just kind of shedding light on her experience and her life. I thought it was great. I like the elements that she talked about and how she talked about being a leader and leading other people, which is something that I have struggled with because I am a theater teacher and I am hopefully eventually going to be back to putting up shows. And it was just really good to see like how she sort of talked about being a managerial role and how she was in that role, and I needed a little bit of guidance on that. I really like this book. I don't rate nonfiction because I just think it's, I'm sort of trying to educate myself from it. But I thought it was great. I definitely want to read her other books and read a couple of more political memoirs. That's definitely something that I realized that I really enjoy. And I have quite a few on my list. I actually did a bullet journal page in my bullet journal that has like 20 nonfiction reads that I do want to tackle. But I wound up really liking this one, and I will definitely read more by this author in the future, and definitely want to check out her fiction reads, which are like mystery, thriller, crime books. So I'm really excited for that. And then the next book that I read or listened to, I guess, was a reread for me, and that is Tweet Cute by Emma Lord. Sorry, Laura's gonna pop in here. Later in this video, I talk about these Violin Delights, and I said I struggled with it, and the reason I struggled with it is just because it was really long. It was like 500 pages, and I just felt a little bit burned out from reading to Legendborn and these Violin Delights in like a 2 week period, and it just sort of burned me out. So as much as I love this book, I struggled with the length of it. It really had nothing to do with the content in the read. It was more the length of it and when I chose to read it, which was totally on me. I don't think you guys will have that problem, but that was more of a me problem and why I struggled reading a few books back to back. And that led me to have a couple of DNFs later in the month because I just wanted to read quicker reads and I couldn't find something that I really liked. So back to the video. I read this book last year and devoured it right at the start of COVID. I think I read this like the week before COVID hit, and I just loved listening to this book. I bought it on Audible and I devoured it. I loved my reread experience. I also, at the end of last year, I read her newest book, You Have a Match. I think I still prefer this one a little bit more. I love Pepper and Jack. I thought it was so unique. I liked it was a mix of like a Romeo and Juliet retelling with a You Got Mail retelling set in New York City, which if you've been following me for the past year, I have missed going around the city. I've missed working in the city. I'm supposed to head back this week, but we don't know what's going to happen if they're going to change their minds. But I just loved this book so much. I devoured it in like 2 days. I love Jack and Pepper as main characters. I love the side characters. I thought it was great. There were so many elements of this book that just made it so fun, and I loved Emma Lord's writing. She's so funny as a writer, and I just really enjoyed this read and was so happy that I got to reread it. And then the next book that I wound up reading is another Owl Crate book, and again, this is sort of where I fell down my hole because I read two close to 500 pages books in like 2 weeks, and that just sort of killed me. So I next picked up these Violin Delights by Chloe Gong. This was the Owl Crate book for December. Overall, I really, really liked this book. I thought overall it was spectacular. And the one thing I liked about this book is that it sort of took the Romeo and Juliet myth and sort of turned it on its head. It's also set in China in 1926, which is a really interesting time period. But this is sort of the after effects of Romeo and Juliet's story, which I liked because they had grown up. There was a lot of elements. It's also about rival gangs. There's also a madness that is creeping through the city, kind of taking down the gangs, and there's an investigation that has to happen, and these two former lovers have to sort of work together to figure out what this madness is. There's a lot of elements to this book. There's a lot of point of view characters. I love the side characters. I love the setting. Thought it was awesome. I probably give this book like 4.5 stars. Honestly, I loved it. I thought I really like the setting of this book also as well. I also just like the characters, Roma and Juliet, because I just thought that they sort of took the Juliet and Romeo myth in sort of a different direction, and I overall really like this book, and I'm really excited to see where book 2 goes. Definitely gonna have to reread this. I'm probably gonna re-listen to it at some point closer to when book 2 comes out. But yeah, I really like this. I've never read a Romeo and Juliet retelling quite like this before that was sort of set after Romeo and Juliet. That story had happened, and Chloe Gong definitely took some of the traditional Romeo and Juliet elements and sort of twisted it. I really liked it. I wound up giving this one 4.5 stars, and I'm dying for the sequel. But these two books back to back was pretty much what like made me have some disappointing reads next, because I was trying to read some quicker things and I just didn't find anything that I loved. So the next book I'm going to chat about, and the last book in this video that I'm going to chat through, is Loki's Wolves by Kelly M. Armstrong and Melissa Marr. I actually picked this one up because I needed a book that had to do with like Vikings, and this was the only book on my TBR that had Vikings in it. And I will admit, I like this book. It reminded me a lot of the Magnus Chase series, but this one is a Norse mythology series. And it basically follows these three kids. It follows Matt, Fen, and Lori, and they live in this town that is closely connected to like mythology. And they realize that Matt is the savior to basically stop bringing about Ragnarok, but then they also realize that Matt's in danger from his family because they think the only way to prevent Ragnarok from coming is to kill Matt, or let him die. So these three kids go on an adventure, and it just was fun. I liked it. I enjoyed it. Didn't wow me. The one thing I did like about this book is that it was the main characters were descendants of Loki and Thor. I like that because when you read the Magnus Chase series, it was not those two main characters. I definitely want to check out book 2 and 3. Probably not anytime soon, maybe in the future, but I did like it. I wound up giving it 3 stars. It just wasn't my favorite. I didn't feel as connected to the characters as much as I wanted to, and that was a little bit disappointing. But yeah, those are the first 7 books that I tackled in the month. Also, these Violin Delights was one of my Time Warp YA book club books that I have to read for that book club that I'm in. But yeah, so that's sort of my reading wrap up. If I had to pick favorites, I would definitely say Tweet Cute still remains a favorite for me. These Violin Delights is definitely a favorite, and Path of Bones is definitely a favorite. If I had to look at less thrilling reads, I would say probably Loki's Wolves. But other than that, this part of it wasn't that bad. I actually had a pretty good reading month, and now we're going to head into the more romantic reads for the second half of the month, which is what always happens during Valentine's Day. But let me know what are some of the books that you read in the first half of the month in the comments, and if you liked it, and I will talk to you guys for my next video. Bye!